Hi, everyone. Sophie Fanelli from the Stuart Foundation. It's my privilege and pleasure to be asking a few questions of Linda. You've heard her incredible bio, but I think what we know Linda as someone who's dedicated her career to making education better for kids in California, obviously across the nation, but you've been such an incredible partner and force. So I have a few questions to get us going, but I'm hoping to engage with you all. We're here to talk about high school redesign, but we're also here to put it in the context of this larger conversation we've been having today about governance, about coherence, about alignment. So I'm going to start with a broad question. We'll go into a few more in details, and then I'll turn it to the audience. So first question, over your career, you've studied a wide variety of education issues, including high school redesign, which has taken on a new sense of urgency. Why is high school redesign of importance now? And what does it mean in practice for students, for educators, and for families?
Just true confession, I've been worried about this since I started teaching in the 1970s, so I'm going to date myself. I taught in big factory model high schools where kids were on the conveyor belt going to, 7 or 8 teachers every day for 45 minutes. I saw 30 at a time, 6 times a day, 180 kids in a day. And I cared desperately about my kids, but I could not care effectively for them in that system. So this is not a new problem. It's one that has been around for a while. Many places, Los Angeles was one of the early ones, New York and other places started redesigning high schools, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to make them more relational, more purposeful, and so on. But it's especially important today, and I'm really thrilled that California is really focusing on this because, first of all, during the pandemic, we really realized how important relational anchors are for students. And we also realized how important it is that the work that they do is purposeful, it's meaningful, it's engaged and engaging. Otherwise, kids will disconnect. In the country as a whole, there was a study not long ago of 25,000 high school students, a survey, 75% of whom only had negative adjectives to apply to their high school experience. The most common adjectives were bored, stressed, and tired. In California, we're doing a little better on the Healthy Kids survey. About 50% of students said that they had an adult who knew them well in their high school. That means 50% did not. About 50% felt a sense of belonging. Only 22% felt they were doing anything important in high school that was meaningful and purposeful for them. And so, we've inherited a lot from those early days. The early 1900s was when this was developed. The curriculum that is expressed in our A through G standards actually started in 1892 with the Committee of 10. It was adopted by the Boers Committee, which was started in 1927. And so, science has changed a lot since then, biology, chemistry, physics, in that order alphabetically, still taught without interdisciplinary opportunities. Math has changed a lot. Computer science, data science weren't around in 1892. There's so many pieces of the curriculum that have to be thought about to allow kids to be ready for the world they're coming into, the AI world in which, so many jobs are changing and so on, but also the need for kids to be purposefully engaged and meaningfully engaged and civically engaged and really feeling like what they're learning can be applied and that they are applying it in relational settings where they're well known. So that's the agenda. A lot of schools are doing it. Many people here are involved in the redesign processes in lots of districts across California. And I think our goal is to really enable all of our high schools to be relationally supportive, purposeful, meaningful, civically engaged places, which are also professionally driven and organized for teachers to collaborate.
So thank you so much for the history lesson and also kind of understanding how
I'm almost as old as when it started.
This is not a new problem, but it is a problem that has a new urgency, right? I think with AI and with the conversation, what's happening with our democracy, and the survey you mentioned, young people are being very clear about what they want to do and what they're not interested in. And if we don't meet them where they are, I think we'll see the crisis of connection, as people talk about it, grow. I want to maybe focus on something that's more full, which is we know that we have incredible examples of schools that are redesigned and that are doing the kind of work that you're talking about. And I see folks in this room who are in such places. But can you talk a little bit about a recent development at the state level? I know at the Stuart Foundation, we've been tracking that closely. So California has just invested $10 million in a school redesign initiative. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and also how it connects to prior investments? I know we've seen $500 million for dual enrollment, for Golden State Pathways, and I think $250 million for dual enrollment, $5 billion for community schools. So could you talk to us a little bit about how we make this set of investments coherent and how the school redesign work can help with that?
Yeah, as we've been talking about all day, a lot of these things come down in fragments. They come down one at a time, and then it's up to folks in the local communities to stitch them together and braid the funding. But really, this is related to the set of investments that you've talked about are related, one, to creating schools like community schools. We have 2,500 of those in the state now. The trailer bill asks it to grow and become part of the state formula so that nearly 2/3 of our schools will be community schools that offer integrated student supports, for health and mental health, but also ensure that there are relational practices, restorative practices, social emotional learning. Kids are well known, families are connected to the school. So that's a big piece of it. And that learning is connected to the community. And then the additional work that's the governor's career master plan really looks at how do we create pathways, career pathways, but college and career pathways. And we have more than 600 linked learning pathways, which started with the last governor's investment in pathways that prepare all the students with A through G coursework. They have access to college preparatory, but they also have access to career pathways that are industry supported, to internships and experiential learning. They work in settings where teachers work in teams that share students in smaller groups because of the way they've organized the curriculum. Advisory systems mean that every kid is well known, every parent has someone to call. There's, all of those pieces with purposeful and meaningful learning. And when you see what's going on in the places across the state that are using these funds successfully, it's very enlivening and exciting to see students so engaged. We were in a school in Oakland, if you'll bear with me for a moment.
No, I was going to ask you about some examples, so this is great.
Yeah, Oakland has gone kind of wall to wall with redesigning its high schools, and the outcomes are much increased graduation rates, much increased A through G rates, much improved achievement levels, et cetera. But in a given school, we were at Fremont High School, we were over at Oakland High School, 4 or 5, sometimes 6 small learning communities, sometimes an architecture pathway, a law and social justice pathway, a variety. And the work that kids are doing is the traditional academics made applied to the work that they're doing in the field. The kids who are in the architecture pathway are designing a park in Oakland. They're actually engaged in making what they do meaningful and useful in the community. The kids who are in the environmental science pathway are studying the water quality at Lake Merritt and figuring out and actually enacting proposals that are improving the water quality in the lake. They're really engaged in what matters to them and making learning functional and applied. And you don't see the problems of chronic absenteeism and disengagement in settings where both their needs for relationship and their needs for purposeful and meaningful learning are being met.
Thank you. And I think that the visits in Oakland were so critical to actually see and feel. I think you have to really walk around in the school to see what it looks like when young people are asked what they care about and given the opportunity to actually work on a project in their communities and see the result of their work in their neighborhoods. So your paper, with Getting Down to Work with Mary Ellen Imordino-Young, talks about brain science. So a lot of what you've discussed, I think teachers, educators, parents have known for a long time. It's exciting to see someone like Mary Ellen kind of working with you to elevate what we know from the brain. And I was in the early childhood room earlier, and some of these themes were coming up, right? That young people need to be engaged in their learning, that it needs to be hands-on, that play matters, that rigor and relevance can work together. So can you talk a little bit about the paper and how it was like to work with Mary Ellen?
And I recommend it to you. I know you're all going to go home and read the 55 papers. And
This one is worth reading, and they're all worth reading, but I really encourage you.
But Mary Helen Immerdino-Yang is a good friend and a neuroscientist who is, measuring what the brain is doing.
Literally taking MRIs of students while they're
and
learning.
teachers.
And teachers.
Yeah. And, one of the things that we know from the science, the emerging science of development is that, first of all, we all learn through experiences and relationships. Relationships are incredibly important. Long-term continuous relationships between adults and kids actually allow teachers to not only know their students well, but the way they teach and evaluate their work, which they've measured with the brain waves, and it's in the paper, is more profound, more connected to what they know about the student. So it makes a difference in the way the teaching, learning, and assessment are going on. We also know that adolescence is a time where the brain is just exploding again. A lot of people talk about the first years of life, but adolescence is a very big moment for brain development.
That's right.
And part of that is the development of transcendent thinking, which allows them to understand the bigger implications of things, that's spam. To understand, and when they do understand the bigger implications of things, it has a lot of beneficial effects for them, including reducing the extent to which they are traumatized by negative events because they have a different perspective on what is going on. They feel more empowered. They have more locus of control, they feel less out of control, but they also are understanding the ways in which they can act on the world and the ways in which what they're learning makes a difference for how they can act on the world. So that's why civic engagement is so important. You think about, until recently, kids were out there and as adolescents, doing apprenticeships, learning how to engage with the world, doing all kinds of both physical and mental work and engagement and contribution. So when we build schools that build on that, where we've built the opportunities for the relational experiences, the continuity of relationships, and we've built these opportunities for deeper learning and deeper thinking, we're really feeding adolescent development in ways that will allow whole adults to emerge with purpose and meaning and care about their community and hopefully a better world for the rest of us.
Thank you. I really encourage you to read the report and go down the rabbit hole of looking at brain science. What's really fascinating about it is that it really reinforces what we know when we see it, right, in schools that do it well. I have a question about kind of the symmetry between what adolescents need in school and how teachers should also have a sense of agency. How you redesign the role of adults in a redesigned schools? Can you talk a little bit about the role of teachers in these models?
Yeah. Some of the earliest engagements I had with redesigned schools were in New York City. The Coalition of Essential Schools was doing a lot of work. Some of you will know the work of Debbie Meyer. You may have read The Power of Their Ideas. Debbie was a kindergarten teacher. This is important because she understood the importance of how you organize a classroom in a school so that teachers really know their kids well. I used to teach high school. Some people thought I was pretty good at it, but I always said if I got good, I'd be teaching like a preschool teacher because they know everything about their students and exactly where they are in all these different areas of development and how to support them in doing that. So the schools that were designed by teachers. There was a chancellor back in 1979 who said, get together, teachers, administrators, parents, community groups, and design new approaches to school. And they broke up the big factory model high schools and created small schools and small learning communities within schools. In California, if you want to see one of the models based on some of that, go to RFK in Los Angeles, where there are multiple small schools in a big building, in which a group of teachers, maybe 4 teachers, math, social studies, English language arts, science, will own 120 kids or 100 kids. It depends on which state you're in, how many kids you have, but it's much smaller than the usual pupil load. And a counselor is attached, sometimes a special educator is attached. In the internationals model, which there are people here who are working on that, it's a 2-year loop with the students from 9th to 10th grade. And when you have a third of your kids who are unaccompanied minors and undocumented often, you need that kind of personal relationship along with the other supports. So that this design, and then teachers have time in the schedule, it's built in to collaborate with their colleagues around the discipline and to collaborate separately with their colleagues around the grade level students that they share in that team. And to do the kid talk that allows them to figure out how to best support the kids. And then they can do interdisciplinary curriculum planning so that, when you're studying revolutions, you're also studying the literature from, the various time periods. You're also looking at some of the scientific investigations and experiments that are coming about. So this kind of a design is not unknown. Many people have built on it over these years. And what the researchers have found over all these years is that graduation rates are better, achievement is better, kids feel more attached, chronic absenteeism is lower when you build these kinds of settings that are not designed to select and sort, but they're designed to develop human talent and human development.
So let me build on this. So I think I'm hearing clearly that we have some building blocks already in place. In California, we have the redesign work that's underway that can build on the community schools investments and the Golden State pathways and some dual enrollment resources. And in places where they braid it together, we can really see it come alive in Oakland or in Los Angeles. What's the role, and you talked a little bit about what young people need to know after high school. So what's the role of higher ed? And I know this is not a conversation about higher ed in school redesign, especially because so many schools are oriented to kind of the admission system, right? And so could you talk a little bit about how we should engage our friends in higher ed in this school redesign, high school redesign work?
I think part of it is as we're considering what do kids need for the world they're in and going into, we need higher education to be doing that as well. I know that I sit with the Boers Committee in a regular way now, and there's a lot of conversation about how do we rethink A through G? How do we bring it, into the present and the future? How do we think about the ways in which curriculum needs to change, learning needs to change? That conversation is also going on, in the regents and in other parts of the system. And so I think that's one place, is really thinking about what is going to allow us to develop the right kind of thinking. One of the conversations in one of the meetings I was at of the Boers Committee was about what is IB doing, what is International Baccalaureate Programming doing, where it's all performance assessments and, theory of knowledge and all kinds of other, what are we doing in other contexts? What kinds of A through G courses would replicate the kind of deep learning and deep thinking? There's a concern in higher ed that kids are coming with less analytic and writing ability, with less deep understanding of mathematics. Well, we have to ask ourselves also, is our testing system, our curriculum system producing the opportunities for the deeper learning, the writing, the analysis, the research that would produce those things? And I think that's a shared quest for K-12 and higher education, and I think that conversation is beginning to go on. The other piece is that in teacher education and leader education, we have some fabulous programs in California that are already doing this. If we place teachers and leaders in these redesigned schools so that they can learn what it's like to be in a school that is equitable, that is relational, that is meaningful and purposeful, that's the way they will then know how to practice.
That's right.
So we have to think about how do we let those schools that are leading the way become the training grounds for educators in the future as well.
That makes total sense. And this idea of really connecting the dots across some of the themes we've heard today between teacher residencies and apprenticeships, the school redesign work, rethinking accountability, making sure that our funding streams are stable, and that school systems can make plans that are more than 3 years out.
And one of the things I just want to note is that there's a big demand for this little tiny pilot program, this $10 million high school,
Right.
Which is supporting 14 redesigned networks of districts and schools, including some counties, including some of the core districts, including a variety of networks like I mentioned, the internationals, linked learning, et cetera. That is getting going to really stimulate and support others that want to do that redesign work. But we had 50 plus applicants, I think 57 maybe, which represented 20% of the districts in the state. 1 out of 5 districts in the state were trying to get this kind of work going through that application, which there was only a month for them to prepare. So I think and we've heard from so many others, there's a lot of sense that we've got to make high school both a purposeful and meaningful place and a place that prepares kids for what they're actually going into.
And a place they want to go to.
And
right?
a place that they want to go to and that teachers want to go to each and every day. And we see this in the schools that have done this kind of work. The kinds of disengagement that we have worried about generally are much less likely to be present. The teachers want to be there. The kids want to be there. They're preparing portfolios of their work. They're doing projects that are connected to their communities. They care about that.
Absolutely, and we've supported some surveys of parents and voters, and what we see across political lines in rural districts, urban districts, is that parents, 80% plus, they want high school to be relevant. They want high school to prepare their kids for college and career. They're really worried about AI and whether or not their kids will be ready with a kind of both content knowledge, but also deeper learning skills to engage in the workplace. So I think the urgency is clear. Everybody agrees. How we go from pockets of innovation to a system-wide focus, what's the biggest barrier, you think? And we'll go to the audience for some questions. What should we tackle first?
Well, I will say that the factory model and all of the pieces that we've been talking about here have grown up. We have a geological dig of policy and regulation that has grown up over a long period of time. And we've talked about it in many areas of schooling today. And we've got it, it was designed to implement the system that was being constructed in the early 1900s. And so at State Board, I will say that we have discovered that the governor's career master plan is impeded by the instructional minutes requirements that are seat time based and make it very hard to do internships and experiential learning. I'm seeing nods from some of the people who are in the field trying to do this. And by, rules that make it impossible to give dual credit for the dual enrollment classes, et cetera. So we're working on all that. So one of the things we're doing is saying, let's figure out what has accrued over all these years. But the same thing is going to be true in a lot of other pieces of legislation. We built a whole system on a seat time transmission curriculum idea. We now have to build a system that's based on competencies, based on how kids, can demonstrate what they've learned, how they can combine areas of learning and make them then applied to problems. So that is not in the design that we're all struggling with. And we're going to have to be very deliberate about rolling back the things that are barriers to the learning that we need kids to have.
Hundreds of ed code pages.
And we'll have to invent things. There is a career passport that is under construction right now. It's part of the career master plan that the community colleges are taking a lead on that will capture competencies that people have acquired in jobs, internship experiences, courses, and package that into a platform that can be an informant to employers and higher education institutions. This is going on across the country. There are lots of ways to think about transcripts and platforms for understanding and communicating competencies that people have acquired that are not just tied to Carnegie units and credits. Probably everybody here knows that the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, which invented the Carnegie unit, is trying to get rid of it right now.
Thank you.
So, there is a lot going on out there. Many, many states are involved in this work. California partners with several others, trying to figure out how do we invent the new system. that will really allow kids to develop the flexible, deep thinking and research skills that are going to serve them as the economy changes over and over and over again.
No, and I'm so impressed by the leadership you've had in pushing for these reforms. We can't wait. I mean, when you talk to young people and adolescents, we do that a lot at the foundation, they're ready for this today. And I understand that it's going to be very hard. It's hard to transform a system that's 100 years old, that it's anchored in old models and frankly, old mindsets about what young people are capable of and what they should have access to. So it's exciting to see so much alignment in this room and so much momentum for this work. Let me turn to the audience maybe and see if folks have questions for our panelists.
I think Lupita's signaling us that we have very little time.
I'll give you the mic. Do you have one? Okay, great. Don't be shy. The first one is hard, but then...
Wash over you. Yeah, no, I mean, we have to undig, we have to do some excavation and undo some things while we're also creating new things. And I think, we think about the conversation we've had today. We were talking about all of the reports that districts have to file and all of the, regulations that come with every stream of funding and all of the audit trail and so on. But there are proposals on the table there too for a single reporting structure where districts could come in and put their basic information and then, add a paragraph or two for the various, grants that they may have received, but not just do the same thing over and over again. The ways in which we try to both use AI to support what adults are doing, as well as what we have to do, which is, and I'm glad California is doing this, really thinking about how to teach the use of AI.
That's right.
In responsible and productive ways, and not just obsess about cheating, but think about the fact that kids are going to use it. How do we teach them to do it? So all of that can also help lighten the load if we're thinking about the way in which we're reshaping the policy infrastructure. And I think we should have, and this came up at some legislative hearings this year, a way to look at each each program that's being enacted, each idea that's coming through the legislature, to evaluate before we start to implement. Where is this already being done? What is the duplication of effort that we can eliminate? What are the ways in which we can do this in the most efficient and streamlined way that gets the services to kids? But also, how do we remove the barriers that may be in the way? It's probably a good place to end.
We are 1 minute or so, but
Okay.
if there's one more question or two.
Yeah, are you asking about a country or about in the U.S.? New York is very far along on a very similar agenda. They're trying to, are there New Yorkers in the house? The Regents exams are no longer required in the way that they once were, and the students can take an international baccalaureate program. They can do a portfolio of their work through the Performance Standards Consortium, et cetera. They're also looking at ways to look at competencies. They are diverse in the ways that California is. So I think that, we have conversations across the states. That's one of them. If I were looking at a country, which is about the size of our median state in the United States, I often look at Singapore, which has 3 national languages, very multiracial, multicultural, multilingual country that has also a very forward-looking approach to building on the knowledge that they have. Everyone who's in the Ministry of Education has come from the schools and comes through there are teaching career ladders and leadership career ladders and specialist career ladders. So everybody in the ministry understands what it is to do the work in the schools and has a shared knowledge base, which I think is part of the need that we will ultimately have to figure out how to meet, which is how do we get a shared knowledge base on which people can really operate with a common set of understandings and goals. That then leads you to need less regulation. Either you invest in the people and what they know and can do, or you end up micromanaging with, trying to do the remote control of teaching, which never works. So, that's a piece of the puzzle, I think.
I've been told we have more time, so let's keep going.
Get the last question.
No, we apparently have more time, so we can keep going.
Great.
If we think about high school redesign and some of the core concepts of greater relational interactions with students, community engagement, civic engagement, all of that, what would teacher preparation look like? How would it
I love that.
That's a great
I
question.
love that question. We talked about this, didn't we? First of all, as you know, the clinical work has to be as important as the coursework, and it all has to be integrated together around the science of learning and development. What do we know about how human beings grow and learn productively and effectively and in a way that is equitable? And then the clinical work needs to be in places that are instantiating this kind of humane, purposeful, equitable education so that that's what you're learning to do. You're not just hearing about it, wah, 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 in your courses. You're actually experiencing it and carrying the work that you're doing in your coursework into that place and vice versa, where the school and the faculty and staff in the school are working with the faculty in the teacher education program to around a shared vision to both improve teacher education and improve the work in the schools in this way together. And so I think that's the heart of it. We also have to support teachers and leaders. I mentioned Singapore. If you're becoming a teacher there, your preparation is entirely free, and you get a salary while you're training to teach. And we need that to be the case for all of our educators. We need to bring them in. It is an investment to have well-prepared educators in every classroom, in every community, and to do that in a way that doesn't leave people in debt and, struggling to stay in the profession. Those of you who went to the workforce sessions would have potentially heard about the fact that we have a relatively high attrition rate. We have an even higher attrition rate for principals in California. Every time we have high turnover of teachers or principals, we lose achievement ground. Kids suffer from that. Continuity makes a difference. And we don't support them much in getting prepared. I mean, people, thank God, we have wonderful people in the profession in this state. But we also have a lot of folks who come in without preparation. It's a very hard way to come in, stay a very short period of time, and leave kids without all the things that they need for stability and learning. So those are all things that I think are part of our agenda for educator preparation.
Linda, I'm glad you brought up the cost of churn, right, and the attrition and what happens when you have this huge number of teachers who leave every year from particular districts and the costs associated with rehiring and training teachers. I mean, there's so many connections across the 55 reports. We're here to talk about high school redesign, but it's connected, obviously, to how we think about our teacher workforce, how we fund schools, the accountability system we have. I think we are at time. No? Oh, okay. We're not at time, so I'm going to keep going. I was going to ask you something, but let's go back to the audience then.
So I'll just wait. So why is this the future of high school versus the future of secondary redesign? We know that fifth graders, sixth graders, by the time we get to high school, that's like...
You are so right.
So agree. And middle school, and obviously, I mean, yes.
Middle school, yes,
the title
absolutely.
here.
But it should be all of secondary school, and it's all of every part of school, but middle school really needs this work also. And in fact, the chair of our budget committee, David Alvarez, has asked specifically that we focus on middle school redesign in our next iteration of this work, along with the high school redesign.
And they're great
Because
examples.
that's a place where we really need kids to feel belonging and engagement and support and all those things.
Agency.
Why is it separate? Right? You have elementary school and there's secondary. Why is it separate? Why isn't the future of secondary, right, which includes middle and high school versus the two being
Yeah.
separated?
Well, they are, of course, in the field, they're often separated, but you're onto a really important point. And there's a study that was done by Marty West at Harvard, and he builds on other studies as well, which have found that middle school is basically a problem, that kids do better if they're in a K-8 setting or if they're in a 6-12 setting, because they have more continuity, they build those settings in ways that are more supportive. But middle school is actually a place where kids tend to lose achievement. A lot of kids get lost because it's designed like a little mini factory model high school too often. And it is a disruption in the developmental process. So I think you're on to another question
the
for
title,
us.
The title does not represent, I think, the work of the redesign of this middle school is included. We really think at the foundation about adolescent learning, thinking really from 10 or 14 to 25. So if we were to rethink school, and focusing on what we know about the brain and about human development, you wouldn't have this artificial kind of K-8, K-6, it's another remnant of 100 years of...
accommodate a baby boom
That's
a number of kids. And they said, here, let's create junior high schools, and then they turn them into middle schools. And they're still challenging and problematic and not adequately supportive of kids.
I want to build on the question that was asked earlier about teacher preparation, and you mentioned UCLA, or the RFK school, and I know I see some UCLA teacher education folks here in the room. They have this incredible program where teachers in preparation who are at UCLA can intern at the UCLA Community School, which is I think, K-12 school, and really learn about kind of the most innovative approaches to education. How do we do more of this kind of program? How do we connect the dots between teacher prep and higher ed with districts? And how can philanthropy maybe help kind of connect the dots there? Or what's your thought on that? And you've done that at Stanford, I know, so just want to get us to talk a little bit about breaking these silos between teacher prep and school redesign.
Yeah. The program at UCLA is wonderful, and there's some great work represented here in the room too from Berkeley and
That's
LMU
right.
and other places. So I just want to shout out to all the folks who are doing this work. But one of the things is that they've taken advantage of the teacher residency grants.
That's right.
Which allow you to pay teachers while they're getting prepared and to get mentors who are going to give them a full year of clinical practice connected to the clinical work that you're doing in the program, et cetera. So they've taken full advantage of that and then placed it in these schools that are doing this extraordinary work to begin with. So I think continuing to grow teacher residencies, which California has put more into the teacher residencies than any other state, but Texas is really investing in that same kind of thing as well to really prepare teachers. What we find in the studies is that teachers who are in residencies rate their programs most highly, go into teaching at higher rates, stay in teaching at higher rates, pass the teacher performance assessment at higher rates without disparities, that it is giving them a really solid entry point and helping us reduce the churn.
And there's some high school pathways now that are really about teacher preparation
Yes,
too.
we have teaching academies in the
Which
state
is
now
really
from
exciting.
the Golden State Pathways.
Yeah.
So we can imagine places where students are in that teaching pathway. They're learning, they're mentoring, they're tutoring, they're learning how to do some teaching. They're potentially in an internship or an apprenticeship, maybe in an early childhood program
That's
where we're
right.
trying to build long pathways. They can come out with, a permit, a child development permit under their belt, start working if they want to right away,
Yep.
go on and get the next, credential, these stacked credentials, and come into the teaching force, And this is the other thing. We've got to make getting through to college and career and through much more efficient, because it had gotten to the place Where in California, after you do your 4 years of high school and slog through,
That's
you
right.
know, I'm not doing anything meaningful here, as many people have come to
We
feel.
hear from students all the
Yeah,
time.
then you had to spend 6 years getting through college because the courses weren't readily available in all of the sectors. And then maybe you'd have in a lot of countries, you can do 3 years of high school and 3 years of college and work that connects the two. And we could be doing that with our dual credit, where kids graduate with a whole year of college under their belt. And if we can get things aligned, go into the college or career pathway, or come out with a credential, an industry
right.
credential. And then when they're ready, they'd be a health technician to start, and then come back later and become a nurse or a doctor when they're ready to do it. We've got to imagine pathways for kids that are just not only more exciting, but also more affordable.
Affordable and fundamentally based on what young people really need to experience,
Yeah.
right, at that age. Are we? One more question and we are, okay.
The good news is that all these things are happening in
I know,
California.
just listening to you, it's incredible, right, to hear the list of,
Yes, I have. Hi, Jeff Vincent from Berkeley. My colleague Sarah Hinkling and I wrote the school facility finance paper for this, and this is the third paper in the series that has shown how grossly inequitable those funds are to modernize facilities to support teaching and learning, make them healthy places to learn and teach. Now there's also been a lawsuit filed on this. We'll see where that goes with the state, but I'm really curious, Linda, what your perspective is on if we can kind of get some significant reform in this sector. Particularly, it's really out of sync with the framework of LCFF.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a next horizon, a next frontier. It's time to pay attention to it. It took a while to get LCFF up and running. The lawsuit, the papers are calling attention to something that's been a challenge for a long time. So I would hope that is on the next docket. Everybody go out and vote. Send in your mail-in ballots. Get somebody over 20%.
no
Then
comment
we'll
on
have
that.
someone to talk to about it.
Is it, okay, well,
All right.
Linda, thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for your engagement, and you heard the call to action, get out and vote.